Hello, Morgan. This is Matthew Irvin. I'm making this brief video to just share as quickly as possible my thoughts. I think it's a great idea that you're taking the initiative to think and move ahead. You know, let's talk about teen pregnancy for a moment. Okay. Um, First of all, my background. I also teach this course in the sociology of marriage and family. And this is a topic that's come up pretty frequently over the years, and is something that deserves some consideration. So here are a few key points that you need to keep in mind, and hopefully this will steer you in thinking in the right direction about this. First of all, teen pregnancy or adolescent pregnancy has actually been declining since its height in the decade 1950 to 1960. Does this mean it is not a problem? Not at all. We have to put this into context, though. In 1950 to 1960, the decade, and it's pretty much, it was pretty much at a high point through about 1970. So first of all, we have to think about this historically. When teen pregnancy was at its height, it had a certain characteristic. And we need to think about what we mean when we talk about the concept of a teenager. Society, and pretty much scientifically as well, these are two things where these coincide. An adolescent or a teen is just defined as between 12 and 20 years of age. So, in the period from 1950 and then starting to taper off in the late 60s and starting to decline precipitously after 1970, right? What we had was it's been declining since 1970. People would marry, for example, and particularly in the decades from 1950 and then the years from pretty much between 50 and 63, people would get married right out of high school. Right? They would get married. You had situations where people would get married when they were 17, and then you see a lot of those teen pregnancies, so-called. People were, women were 18 or 19 or 20 years old. Okay. That said, marriage is not, doesn't afford the sort of security that it once was. If we look at people who address teen pregnancy now, they'll go, "Oh, well, marriage would be the answer." No, not at all. That would be a disaster. People we don't live in a world where people get married. When they're 17 or 18 out of high school, because in 1950, the average life expectancy was, I would have been dead for 3 years. I'm 63. Okay. So, point A, teen pregnancy actually has declined. So, B, it is still a social problem. What do we mean by a social problem? A social problem is not a problem everywhere. Even the pandemic is not a problem everywhere. If I see, I live in a community, a city, where there are wealthy people that have a jet port, in another part of the city. And if I'm a multi-millionaire, I can just, the pandemic doesn't faze me. I just hop on the plane, fly to Florida, play some golf. I'm alone on my jet, when I fly home, right? So not every problem affects everybody. And for many people, adolescent pregnancy is not a problem, but it is in certain contexts. So the next question we have is number 3. Under what context is teen pregnancy a problem? Okay. So I'm going to point you in a direction on this. Okay. Clearly, marriage at 19 is not the answer. Okay. we don't want to get into a moralistic debate necessarily about what's right or wrong. Right? Because actually the average age of a person who is not married who has a baby is now 27. The actual, okay, that's the average age. So adolescent pregnancy has declined. But where it is a problem, it is a public health problem. So it is a problem with access to information and technology. And by technology, I mean contraceptive technology. Okay? So you need to think about it like that. Where, and I would Google where are the highest rates of teen pregnancy in the United States. I would do a search, a query, and then look at, why that is. And I think your answer is going to be, it's a public health situation. We don't have the places where adolescent pregnancy is high, and you can't make a generalization. It's not one racial group or another. Social class is the determinant usually. And so because there's an outsized number of people in poverty, who are poor in communities of color, they have within group maybe a higher rate of adolescent teen pregnancy, but overall, whites are the people with the greatest, numbers of teen pregnancy. Okay. And when you look, there's a common denominator between a place, Pike County, Kentucky, which is 96% white, or a county in Oklahoma, or counties in cities, that are very different, in terms of race. What you see the common denominator is lack of access to education and reproductive technology for adolescents. Okay. There's a high corollary, for example, between sexually transmitted diseases among adolescents and teen pregnancy, right? And it's usually a failure of some popular way of teaching, or politically motivated way of teaching adolescents in high school about sex and the consequences. Usually, what they do is, they're called abstinence-based only programs, where they'll tell somebody, they'll tell students, high school students, don't have any sexual relations until you're married. Well, that doesn't work. Okay. So, as you work through this is what you need to point to. Avoid any sort of overgeneralization. Avoid any, of that or preconceived notions, and zone in on the question of where, this is happening and why it is happening. And the data, again, are going to indicate that it's a public health. It's not a moral issue. It's not because people are not moral. It is a public health issue. It is the way in which information is delivered incorrectly in almost every front. Where the United States does an abysmal job of teaching adolescents about sex. They just do a terrible job regardless of what one's political views, right? So it's a public health concern. So I hope this helps you to think about what you're going to be doing. I'm making this video. Hopefully, the video takes a minute to load, so hopefully this will be to you by 1 o'clock. Okay? Take care.